Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for letting us do this, AJ, and thank you, InterNACHI, for actually having us. Basically, this is just an open discussion where have some planned things, but for the most part, we just want to kind of talk to Joe here and just find out what got this all started. And back in November, this is where it all kind of started. So go ahead and kind of tell the story.
Yeah, so naturally, I complete gas inspections on a daily basis. So, mainly for rental purposes in the UK, you have to have a gas inspection every 12 months for safety and regulatory purposes. Being in the car so much, doing different inspections, I was listening to the InterNACHI podcast, stumbled across Dirk's podcast, and thought, hey, do you know what? It'd be really interesting to talk about the differences between what we do in the UK and what we do in the States. Picked up the phone to Dirk, and it sort of spiraled into into where we are today. And I feel like there's some really sort of interesting differences in what we do. I mean, obviously in the UK, we're very reliant on natural gas. Different states in the states vary on whether you need natural gas or you need electric. And the way the home buying process works and inspections work is just really different. So I thought it'd be good to sort of delve into your guys' expertise as to what you do and what we do.
Yeah, that's and it was funny because we were talking about this earlier before we even started the podcast that most people that he calls, if they find out something, they just hang up. And me being who I am, I always take the calls anyways. Even like when I get spam calls, I sit there and talk to them. So that's what I thought it was at first. But the main difference, like between the UK, is a lot of the buildings are a lot older. For
Yeah,
number one, I mean, you're looking at 1700s all the way up,
yeah,
if not older than that sometimes. And people just tend not to get the home inspections.
yeah. It's when well, we've bought and moved several times over the last few years, and naturally, our solicitors or attorneys they won't request a home inspection, they won't request a gas inspection, they won't request an electrical inspection. It's not part of the process. A lot of people will do it without actually getting an inspection done. Naturally, obviously, my clients get them done all the time. We really promote it, but it's just not a common sort of thing other than for mortgage purposes, for the mortgage valuer to come out and say, yes, this house is worth what you're buying it for. Outside of that, it's not really very common. Um, and to be honest with you, we were speaking before about it. I really think what InterNACHI, not that I'm joined InterNACHI, but I really think what InterNACHI does is great because it's a third party group that educates individuals about inspection, helps people grow, helps people learn, but it also shows that inspectors go the extra mile. You're not just meeting the minimum standards, you're doing something a little bit extra. Whereas in the UK, it's very, very regulated. But outside of the gas safe register, we don't have many third party aspects that are sorry, my phrase.
Home inspector.
Yeah,
Right.
we have those third party aspects where we can go and sort of learn that a little bit more. Whereas international is really good for that and how I stumbled across the podcast really.
Joe, how do you think that impacts safety of the people buying these houses? I mean, aren't in US we see a lot of young families buying houses, and I think Dirk and I could both agree there's if we count the hairs in between us, probably found more safety concerns that probably could have killed somebody. And that's why I leave my house every day is I take pride in keeping people safe. And what kind of protections do they have or would you like to see besides gas inspections when it comes to just all the things in a house that could potentially hurt somebody?
Yeah, so I think it's funny because well, it's very not funny, but like when you look at so I'm studying a doctorate alongside this, and some of the research like we picked up is how many safety defects are actually found in gas installations. And whereas like the landlord and the rental side of things have a mandated 12-month check every year, homeowners don't have any mandate to actually inspect their gas installations. But yet, when you look at the statistics of, I think it's 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 have some form of unsafe appliance. Now, with that, when I say unsafe appliance, that could just be that it's not clipped, the pipework isn't clipped correctly. So it's not necessarily detrimental to health, but there's still a risk there because it's not been clipped correctly or the flue hasn't been sealed. So there's a small risk of fumes coming back into the property. But when you think about all those risks that aren't potentially being picked up, it only takes one small thing, and well, it's all, carbon monoxide is a silent and deadly killer that potentially isn't being picked up in thousands of homes. But then that also goes into the electrical side of things. How many people can get electrocuted because there's been a DIY job? Someone's moved a socket, someone's thought they could change the consumer unit, and that's not been checked when you buy a house. Whereas, from your guys' perspective, it's there. You've got that full detailed sheet. You can then pass that on to an electrician, or you can say, listen, from our perspective, we think it's safe and sound. So
Yeah.
And we were talking about this too, like when he goes into gas inspection, if he does notice something, you normally say something.
yeah. So in fact, that's one of the things one of the questions I sort of want to raise with you. So from our perspective on the gas side, we put what's called like a do not use sticker on an appliance. How do you guys? I know obviously from your side, you would recommend a licensed plumber or a licensed electrician to come and inspect further. But say in a property now, you guys found something that you thought was unsafe. What is your practice in comparison to our practice? So I'll give you our practice first. If I was to walk into a property and I say, right, this boiler is unsafe, we put a do not use sticker on the boiler, naturally, so they don't use it. We would then write a job sheet to say this is why it's unsafe, and we have 3 different categories. So we have at risk, where turning off the appliance removes the risk. At risk, where turning off the appliance doesn't remove the risk, or immediately dangerous. Immediately dangerous for us is like carbon monoxide coming into the room, a gas leak, etc. And then we leave that paperwork on site. What is your guys' process in comparison to ours if you find something unsafe?
I mean, usually it's get the fire extinguisher, crack a window.
Run as quick as you can.
Yeah, sometimes, but we're not a regulating authority, so that I think that makes it a little difference with what we can and can't do to someone else's house. Some of our practices are kind of built into the InterNACHI standards of practice, but there's others that, as a private home inspector, you talk about how lawyers help with the transactions of real estate in the UK. We have realtors and lawyers that write these, and the contracts dictate sometimes the limits of what we can or cannot do, whether it's intrusive. But I think Dirk would probably agree that most of the time, if there's something going on, the people that are living there, they don't want to get hurt, and they may not know. And the people that are owning the property, if they're not living there, they don't want anything to happen. So usually it's just direct communication and open, honest risk assessment, and just make sure everybody knows. But obviously there's on-site risk reduction techniques that we do too, but we aren't going to be red tagging things.
Well, I think a lot of people get that misconception that we red tape things. But I was doing a house one time, and there was a significant amount of gas leak inside and this was in Minnesota. And I mean, you walk down the basement, you're like, "Whoa, this is bad." The first thing I did is I got out of the house, and called the listing agent. And I said, "Hey, look, I'm finding a gas leak. I'm going to turn this off." And she's like, "Is it that bad?" And I said, "Well, as soon as I walked downstairs, my meter went off. You can smell it. It's big." She goes, "That's funny because they just had the gas looked at." So I shut it off. Gas guy comes out, looks at it, and red tags the entire unit. And it's like,
Mhm.
he can do that. As a gas guy, you can do that. As a home inspector, I was doing what was safe for the customer. And so I was communicating. I also made a list. I always carry paper with me, and I always have attention customer, and then I put what it is on there and put it right on there, where they can find it really quick. Sometimes I'll tape it to the faucet because there it is. That's what I've done. Luckily, I haven't had too many of that. So
We had a scary situation about 2 years ago, um, in probably a 1940s house. It was a 2-story. It was a vacant home in the wintertime. And when my inspector got there, he told me he wasn't feeling good. He's working, and then he was a plumber for 20 years, and he said, Jim, I think I figured out what's going on. The metallic exhaust pipe for the furnace and the water heater, there was a cover on top of it that wasn't a muffin style cover. It was I don't know the PC way of saying this, but just kind of the Tin Man hat, right? And the rusted, yeah, the uh the strap on it had rusted and it had fallen down and was restricting the flow and backdrafting the carbon monoxide into the house. So that one, we had to reschedule the inspection and, got that squared away right away. Luckily, it was a vacant house, but we've seen a lot of them where there's disconnects in the exhaust system for a furnace or water heater, and sometimes it's near a bedroom. The best story with that was Dirk. I'm not sure if you ever met him. I don't remember his name, but he was an instructor at a local home inspection school in Minneapolis. And his friends joked around and they called him the human carbon monoxide detector. And he could tell with goosebumps on his skin and how his body felt if there was even low level elevation of carbon monoxide. The sad part of the story is when he was a kid in the 50s and 60s, he used to have terrible dreams and they put him through electroshock therapy to try to fix that before they had better ways of handling this. But later he became a home inspector, and upon looking at old pictures, family photos, he realized that the flue pipe was back pitched on their boiler or furnace. And he thinks he knows his room was right next to it. And he thinks he was just getting carbon monoxide poisoning for his young adult life. So yeah, it's a real thing.
Yeah, that's really severe. And
Yeah.
that's like, especially we do probably between 4 and 6 inspections on a daily basis. And it's surprising how many things you see that customers think is normal. And actually it's like, no, that's not normal. That's actually quite an unsafe defect.
Yep.
And then you go further into it and they say, from our side, obviously gas is regulated. Landlords should have to have an annual inspection. And then they go, oh, well, the check you're doing there, the guy who did it for the last 3 years, he never checked that. And you think, wow, like, and some of these things are just, running your app. We have what's called a combustion analyzer. And we'll just do a 2-minute sweep and that will pick up any carbon monoxide. So in theory, you're not supposed to have any carbon monoxide coming from a combustion boiler. So natural, so you call it furnace, combustion boiler. It's a room sealed appliance. Room sealed means all the fumes go outside. And you'll run your analyzer just around the casing or around the flue, and you'll pick up 3, 4, 5 parts per million. Well, that means that appliance is no longer room sealed. And that 2-minute check is potentially saved a life just on picking up that carbon monoxide straight away. Then you can at-risk the boiler. And 9 times out of 10, often it can be a very simple fix. Just when they've put the flue together, it's just tint the rubber a little bit. So just by taking it out and putting it back in, resealing that rubber, the job's done. But potentially that's been left, and that's why I think, especially from your guys' perspective, some of these things you can see on a visual inspection. You can see straight away that that flue is just slightly out of line, or you can see it's kicking out a little bit just by visually.
Yeah.
So what's really good from your guys' perspective, the home buyer buys the house, you guys pick it up, you then pass it on to a licensed plumber or contractor. We come, the fault gets fixed. In the UK, potentially, the home buyer buys the house, the attorneys haven't requested a gas check, that fault never gets picked up until it gets too bad and potentially becomes
a problem.
Yeah, it becomes a problem, a severe problem.
Let me ask you this. They say a lot of people from the National Association of Realtors will move every, 5 to 10 years. Dirk and I, we're doing home inspections, but home inspection isn't that old of a career. Early to mid 80s, we started hearing about it. In the 90s, it became more mainstream. But think about all the houses that have sold and how many safety defects have been picked up on and how the housing stock has improved. And how do you think that would impact the UK? Because there's no reason why it couldn't happen. But just, think about that. I mean, the house I'm in right now, this one's the original owner, but there's many other houses that are, 35 years old that might have had, I'd say, 4 or 5 inspections at this point. And, collaboratively, as those things kind of get identified, the housing stock just becomes safer, even if the homeowners don't recognize the correlation.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, well, like I said to Dirk before, like one of the big things we do, especially because we're looking after landlords, is we'll naturally walk in. A lot of time investors will buy property blind. So they don't see the property. Often they have cash, so they don't get the inspections of the property. And they pass it on to the realtor. The realtor lets out the property. They get the mandated checks. So the mandated checks for a landlord is a gas inspection, an electrical inspection, and then new regulations in the UK now for energy efficient certifications. So houses have to be to a certain standard, but that's not really an inspection. That's more making sure the house is sealed as it should be and it's energy efficient. But then naturally, what I do, say we go to a terraced house, you guys call it a townhouse, we call it terraced, and you've got a gas meter in the basement, you'll do the tightness test. But then naturally, then you look up and you see the floor joists and you see the central heating pipework has been leaking onto that floor joist for as long as it possibly has been. No one's picked it up. There's been no inspection. That floor joist is completely rotted. Well, all of a sudden, then you walk upstairs and the floor is bouncing. Well, it's bouncing because the central heating's been leaking or the cold water's been leaking and it's never been picked up. And that's because cash buyers bought it blind. No one's inspected. And if I didn't go that slight step above what our minimum standards are and just quickly visually check the central heating, the cold water pipeworks, that wouldn't be picked up until someone was dangling through the floor like a cartoon, with the arms in the air. And it's surprising just how many things you see. Very similar to, one of the big things is, a loft naturally is meant to be a similar temperature to outside. But yet when you go in lofts, they're absolutely roasting hot. The ventilation's incorrect. You see the rafters and you think, but we see it because the boiler's in the loft or the furniture's in the loft. So we go up there and you're sweating and you think, wow, it's really, really warm up here. And then we ring the landlord and say, I think you should check that out. Some of these rafters are looking a bit sorry for themselves. You can see, the homeowner's got a bucket under there with a towel under there, which is never a good sign from a roof. And so many of these things just go completely missed.
It's fine and it'll work itself out. This is trying to get back to the nature. But we've seen quite a bit. I know, because I was inspector in Minnesota and Jim definitely is there. And coming to Florida, we have that same issue that inspectors sometimes don't even go into the attic. And I know you've seen that. And the chances of something to happen is your floor and your attic. And then we try to get everything in between. Yeah. And it's like those two components alone are your foundation. We're talking about foundation before this webinar too. And we got to realize that the safety of people is our main concern. Yeah. It doesn't have to do with just gas. It doesn't have to do with just your rafters or your trusses or whatever it is. Safety is the main concern whenever we're talking about, especially InterNACHI, and that's why InterNACHI has been such a powerhouse because they have these standards in place, and honestly, it should be used worldwide. And those standards get overlooked so many times, and it's like, but if we acclimated these, I mean, I think that's what we're trying to do is acclimate it across the entire world, not just here in Minnesota or Florida where I'm at, or California, and then you go across the whole U.S. here. We got Ken joining us right now. Ken's also a certified master inspector. I actually look at him as one of my mentors too. So, Ken, if you want to say hi, you got to unmute yourself. See, we're all we all worked.
There we go.
Hey, Ken.
How's it going? I'm off a look. How you guys doing today?
Yeah, I'll go. How are you?
Doing well.
Yeah, definitely will. So, we were just talking about the difference of home inspections versus just gas checking. That's what they do over in the UK. And so when we talked about how Joe here got together with us and how I picked up the phone call and actually talked to him, and then it's been 6 months.
Okay, it's been a while,
It's
yeah.
been a while, so we actually became friends over the time. And so he's kind of looking at InterNACHI as what we can what can we do for them, and perhaps across the entire world. So I don't know if you had any questions. That's pretty much where we're at, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, in a nutshell.
And like,
I'm good right now. Keep going, and I'll join in. I got to get caught up.
Okay. Sounds good.
yeah. But no, I think
I'm
like
I'm on location in South Carolina, and it's doing something totally different. It's not been a very fun job. It's been using the old noggin a whole lot, but so I'm trying to get right back around inspections, and we'll do it to it.
And this is Jim. If Jim wants to say hi, and Ken.
Hey, Ken, how you doing?
Good, Jim. How are you?
I'm phenomenal. So just living my life in strangers' houses. That's how this going.
yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah,
In and out,
when
in and out.
yeah, when I die, I'm just gonna have a flashback of strangers' basements and all the stuff that I don't want to see again. Um, well, Joe, one thing that I always thought was interesting was when we look at mold spore counts. I've heard and seen that some of the European counts seem to be kind of a better indicator. The U.S. really hasn't regulated kind of what they're seeing, and it seems like maybe Europe has been focusing more on mold and health issues with people. Why do you think that hasn't returned back on itself and kind of started more of a, hey, let's take a look at this house deeper before we buy it, before we move our family in there? Do you think there's any reason why home inspections haven't become as popular as they are as the US?
I think it's more, I, without broadly sort of speaking for everyone, cultural. Like when we buy a house, naturally we've done the process a few times over the last few years because we renovated a few properties. You know, you buy the house, you then hire your attorney. Your attorney will then, start the paperwork. You file for your mortgage in most cases. And in most cases, the mortgage will then send out their own very basic surveyor who doesn't really, not speaking for every mortgage surveyor, but doesn't really, they often don't come in the house. They often will do it online. They'll determine whether your house price is correct. And then that's it. So long as it's good, away you go. You're then sort of, you're heavily trusting the people you're hiring. For me personally, I'm expecting the attorneys to, request a gas check, request an electrical check, request some further things. But culture, because that's not probably how we do it all the time in the UK. First time buyers will just go off whatever the advice is that they're given. Now, that's not saying the advice they're given is incorrect because the attorneys are obviously following their job off their due diligence. I just feel like a lot of things are going unmixed. For example, you guys will come out and you'll check the foundations, you'll check for step cracks or horizontal cracks or vertical cracks on the wall. If no one comes out to look, no one really knows until you've moved into the property, and then you're walking around or you're sitting there in the garden looking at your back wall and you're thinking, "There's a big crack on my wall." But then but that's not been picked up because no one's ever actually looked at it, and that's where, like, from my perspective, because I work for a lot of investors, even though my specialism is gas, I would classify myself as like a gas specialist in regards to inspections. I always try and go the extra mile for the people we work for because often they've not had those inspections. So, when you're walking around the side of the property because the flue comes out the outside wall, you just quickly scan, and I'm not qualified as a building surveyor or anything like that. But if I see a crack on the wall or a step crack or a horizontal crack, I'll just take a picture and fire that over to the landlord and say, "Hey, tenants probably haven't raised this to you, but are you aware that there's a crack on the wall?" a big example for us, probably only a couple of weeks ago, we went to a property, we picked up the keys. Again, the investor was a cash buyer, so he's bought the property. He's only doing his, rightfully so, it's his business, but he's only doing his bare minimum checks. So electrical inspection, gas inspection. This investor had basically refurbed the whole house. So we'd had a brand new rewire, all the electrical was new. He'd had a brand new boiler installed. For whatever reason, couldn't get back in touch with his old installer. So he asked me to go and do a fresh gas certificate ready for the tenants moving in. When I got there, whoever had installed the gutters hadn't put a downspout into the drain. So now, naturally, it's not something I would ordinarily look for, but it was typical British weather. The skies were grey, the heavens had opened, and it was just a shower right onto the wall. And you could see this had probably been going on for 2-3 weeks. The render on the wall was all cracking because of how naturally our weather is awful. So it rains a lot. In the short term of these gutters being installed, you could see the water damage already. I went upstairs quickly. You could see the damp coming through the wall straight away. Now, okay, from that perspective, he'd renovate the house. He was expecting to be done, but it just shows someone else could have bought that property and never noticed that downspout was missing. I sent him I sent him actually a 5-second video of the shower that was coming down the side of his house. Naturally, then he was able to get back with the installers and get that fitted. That's a bit of an anomaly because that was the installer's fault, not the home's fault. But there's many examples where that would just be missed because the homeowner would buy that house, it would never be inspected, and they buy a house full of damp and the render cracking, and all of a sudden that, couple of £100 job, couple of $100 job to put a downspout in becomes a thousands of dollar job because you got to re-render the whole wall, you've got to do your damp proofing, redecorate the inside wall. They're things that are really easily,
Avoidable.
Yeah, avoidable, and you guys would pick that up.
We try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We try.
I think a fascinating correlation that I've kind of put together is, I work with a lot of real estate lawyers and I work with a lot of realtors. Now, in the United States, the realtors are one of the few professions that can write legal documents besides lawyers. And what they do is they're helping them buy the house. They're helping, facilitate the transaction, write the contracts. And I wonder if the lawyers who are doing some of these transactions in the UK, if they feel their job is just the paperwork instead of necessarily helping that buyer find the right home there for their family and walking them through it, as well as most of the time these realtors, they usually develop a personal relationship with their clients, and they're going to stay in contact, and they want to make sure things go smooth so that they can get future business, but also feel good about what they did. Do you feel like maybe these real estate lawyers are looking at it more as just a check the box, fill out the form?
I think you very much literally the nail on the head, quite literally there. So obviously in the States, you guys look to close a property within, you can close a property within a week, but 30 to 45 days is probably your closing period for a property. In the UK, the house sale can take 6 months, and that's a straightforward, even a cash buyer. We've sold a property with a cash buyer, and it's taken 4 or 5 months for that property to go from offer right the way through to closing. And that's with us selling, so it was our own property. We've had the electrical certificate, I've done the gas certificate. It was, it's had we paid for a full building survey just for our own peace of mind to show, right, this house is totally safe and sound. And even with all that paperwork from day one, that process takes 5 months. The honest answer is, between us and our solicitors, other than when we have to sign a document, we don't really speak to them.
You're done.
Wow.
It's very much, or maybe again, it's very subjective. We work with a lot of obviously different private clients and investor portfolio landlords, where you'll get some home buyers where they'll move into the property, and it always makes me laugh in the order in which they've done it, because the homeowner will ring me once they bought the house, and they'll say, "Hey, we just bought this house. can you come and do the gas check? And one of the questions I always ask, just more out of personal intrigue, is you could have done this check at any point over the last 6 months while this house sale was going through. Why have you waited until the house is legally yours for me to come and uncover potential problems? Why not ring me when you made the offer and say, hey, I'm buying this house. Can you go and do a gas inspection just so we can check everything's safe and sound before we buy it? And it's always, yeah, the answer sort of varies. That I don't, well, obviously, I think, to be honest, there is a right answer. The right answer is do it when you make the offer. But it always sort of boggles my mind how people wait until they legally own something before saying, hey, can you come and inspect this and make sure it's safe and sound? It's a weird
Yeah.
sort of concept.
It sounds like, it's one of those things where if they knew ahead of time, would negotiations be part of the process if they uncovered something that was a big issue? Maybe it needed a new boiler or furnace.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of, speaking from a buyer and a seller, if any of one buying my property wanted to send someone to come in and inspect, for me, there's two things. One, I would personally say, yeah, feel free, send whoever you want, so long as they're qualified to do the job and we can verify that they are, if you're a gas engineer, you're on the gas safe register. If you're an electrician, you're on the, you're with a governing body. That's fine. Come and inspect. We got no problems with that. There's two the big red flag is if you're selling the house or you're buying the house and the seller says, oh, no, we don't want inspections. For me, that's an immediate, well, why wouldn't you want an inspection? And then from our perspective as well, is that I can electrics is very similar. If you fit a new consumer unit, I don't know how it works in the States, but if you fit a new consumer unit for the electric panel, that's registered with a building regulation certificate. So it's almost public record. You can go online and you can verify that has been installed by an electrician. When we fit a new furnace or a new boiler, we register that with building regulations and gas safe. So essentially right now I could pull up Google, the gas safe register, I could put in my zip code and my house number, and it will tell you the exact date that my boiler was installed on that house. So anyone buying a house can do that due diligence quite easily. One of the big things I say to a lot of home buyers is just do that. Because if you go on the gas safe register and you see there's no gas appliances installed, well, you know that something was done wrong, because legally, as a gas safe installer, we have to register all our installs. So either that install is really quite old, because it moved over to the gas safe register, I think about 10, 15 years ago. So you're buying a house with a really dated appliance because it's not on the register. Or if it was installed in the last 5 to 10 years, that person hasn't registered the appliance. Well, what fault are you going to walk into if it's not been registered?
So we do the same thing here. Like we have permits that they have to pull, and then a lot of times, I don't know if you do that, Jim, but I pull up the permits of the house, and normally it goes back 10 years. But one of the reasons why I brought Ken on was because he was an appraisal at one time, and he knows about those types of quick checks. Basically, is what the bank does, and I don't know, like
Right.
can elaborate.
I've actually seen deals go down, that cash deals in 2 weeks. Boom, 2 weeks at closing, if they want them quick enough. But yeah, I've saw both sides of the story. That's what kind of got me interested in home inspections. And tell you another funny story about not getting one is I definitely, not just from my advantage point, recommend a home inspection. I think everybody should get one. And to prove that valid point, and then I'm not just saying that, I bought my house about 8 years ago. And the funny thing was the seller, his name and we had the same first name. And he looked at me and says, "You're a home inspector." And I was like, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Why did you hire a home inspector to do your inspection? You could have done it yourself." I said, "Because I felt like he would do a much better job for me than if I did it myself." And there would be no, what do you call it? In a legal terms of
Conflict of
doing
interest.
conflict of interest, correct. So, I mean, to go without one to me, it is totally to your disadvantage. Now, when I got into this about uh, 15, it's been 16 years ago or something, but about 12 years ago, I did a bunch of studying or got statistics through the National Association of Realtors. And believe it or not, only about 72% of all people actually got home inspections. And so then I started breaking it down and looking at it. Well, there's a certain amount that's investors. Investors have like a contractor in their back pocket that they're probably going to use, that they bring along with them to look at some of these properties, and they're just more or less what's it going to cost to bring it up to date. So they don't necessarily need a home inspector. But for the average person, especially when you had mentioned about first time buyers, you definitely want to get a home inspection.
Yeah.
I don't care where you are.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
And like, funny, I was talking to Dirk before, and like one of the questions I asked Dirk before we got on the podcast was like, how often do you get repeat business? Because like, it's funny, like uh, generally, if something's under warranty, people will get it serviced, whether it's a car, whether it's a boiler. They want to maintain that warranty, so they do whatever the minimum is to keep the warranty. I.e., you hit boilers we install need a service every 12 months. And then outside of that, you have the customers then you don't hear from for 4 years until there's a problem. And like I always think, from a trade perspective, we always look at things very differently because we see the preventative measures that are put in place. But, and I can speak for myself, I know I've had one, but how often do you get that repeat business? I.e., does someone say in 5 years' time, say, oh, do you know what? You did my inspection 5 years ago. Can you just come and re-inspect to make sure there's no further settlement issues or cracks on the wall or roofing issues? Do you get much of that?
See, we do the
you'd be.
Right.
I was going to say you'd be surprised at how many. I would say probably 40% of my business is a lot of repeat people because number one, and I think Dirk was getting ready to touch on this, in the state of Florida, uh, homeowners insurance is really a pain to keep up with and to keep, period, especially if you don't have a brand new house. And so it's continually going. And when they get if for instance, if I'm the homeowner and I like Dirk, I'm going to go back to him. And so the amount of loyalty there is surprising. And even home buyers, I'm not too sure about your culture over there. If somebody, it used to be here, if you bought a house, you stayed there forever. And so your repeat as far as purchasing would be very low. But in America, I think another thing, a statistic I'd found out through the National Realtors Association is that the average home somebody lives in it between 5 and 15 years, and they sold it again and moved on. And it's a lot of different reasons, whether kids growing up, finished growing up, or changing a job, relocating, and that sort of thing. But it happens. I get a lot of repeat business and thrive off of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, also with that, like one of the big things I see is with repeat work, it's surprising that
they remember you.
well, yeah, one you build a great rapport with repeat work. Obviously, you know, you get to see people yearly or annually, whatever it is, biannually. But not only that, it also allows you to get on top. The point I was trying to get at really more was you actually get on top of problems before they become a problem.
Right.
So by doing that, you know, it's not needed. I'm not saying there would be necessarily a need to do an annual home inspection, but just by clocking that shingle on the roof that's just developed a crack, or the wind this month has got it, and you've had a home inspection maybe 2 years later, you've got on top of that before it's rotted all the underboard. Yeah.
Yep.
And like, it's one of the big things that I advocate for from the gas industry is that, you know, annual inspections aren't necessarily us just coming and saying, yeah, it's okay every year. Finding that one small issue when it's only a £10 issue or $20 issue is a lot easier than it becoming a $1,000 issue because you left it for 4 years, because you had an inspection 5 years ago and it was all okay. So it will continue to be okay. Do you get much of that where you'll be called back and you'll go, oh, actually, the roof has deteriorated a little bit or something like that?
I do what I call walk and talks too, and I've done I probably do about maybe 4 a year. That's it. Where they just want me to go in the attic and check the attic, and then see if there's anything goofy going on with their house. It takes about an hour, so I charge like $100. I just go through the house, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't. I'm so glad you caught that because this could have been a big problem. I just went on a roof a couple weeks ago, and I ended up giving it to our roofer that's in our BNI group." And I said, "Look, the your ridge vents are completely corroded." I went up there and I just touched it, and it crumbled.
Yeah.
And it's like just that alone. He's like, "Dirk, I am so glad that you saw that." I'm like, "Well, that's what you hired me for. That's why I did it." So it was just those little things.
Yeah, it was like, one thing I know obviously all you guys will 100% advocate for this. It's obviously it's our job.
Profession.
But like what should I say is it's so important to have regular routine in everything because you can pick things up so early before they become a major issue. Right the way down, especially in a climate like Florida, it's so hot. So naturally, gas
Florida,
expand, it'll contract. It'll expand, it contracts.
exactly.
A lot of your gas meters are outside.
Yep.
So over that time where it's getting so warm, like they are expanding, contracting, a leak might have developed over the next 12, 18 months.
Right.
That you would never known about unless you have another inspection.
Right. That's exactly right. Another thing about Florida is hurricanes. I tell people all the time, if you've went through a major storm, when one comes through, get somebody to check your roof. And a lot of people, because there's,
And
I'll say a number of roofers out there that just want some work, uh, they are far will like to have somebody that's non-biased like us as a home inspector come look at their roof and may even find things like you were just saying. I've found leaks before in a roof that they didn't know. I thought, well, a leak, I was going to see water coming in the house. No, it kind of oozes through and it could be leaking and you never know it. You never know it. And I don't more than a handful of times I've helped somebody with a situation like that. But I that's another thing that I market at is say, hey, if you want an unbiased opinion, if you don't know a roofer that you can thoroughly trust, but one way or another, get that roof inspected by somebody after every major storm because you just never know when it's going to start coming apart, and it will.
Jim and I were talking about a couple I would say probably a year ago or something, where he saw something and he goes, "I found out something really cool if you want to use it." And I'm going to tell everybody out there that's on this webinar your idea. You got these phones and you can ping where the leak is in the attic and you can check it on the roof. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. And I remember Jim saying that.
Yep. Yeah, I use AirTags. So Apple AirTags.
AirTag.
So yeah, if I see a leak, what I'll do is I'll try to put that AirTag there, and then I can use my phone around the property, and it'll tell me that I'm 2.5 feet, to the left of it. Instead of trying to use tape measures and try to get close, like I can get really on top of some of these spots and kind of know what's happening on the other side of the floor or the wall or the roof, and really get a good idea.
That's a really good idea. Actually.
It's expensive. It costs about $18 for one, but yeah, I mean, and then you keep it in your tool bag. So if your tool bag ever goes missing, you can track the guy that took it. But gentlemen, I've got to jump off here. It was a pleasure. I've had a ton of fun. I think some of the big takeaways. I think it's just the real estate process is just a little different in how that works, but also just in advocacy. I think everybody's kind of got such a narrow job. And then even then, I know Ken was a previous appraiser, so was I for a long time. All we would look at with appraisals is, and first off, most appraisers don't know a darn thing about construction. It's not taught to them. I just knew about it before I went in there, but they were looking at the Appendix D standards from FHA, VA for safety and structural. And even then, a lot of times they didn't know much about it. The training on it was literally, 2 hours, if that. So,
Yeah.
relying on that is, it's hard because buyers, sometimes they trust these things. just like a city, we call them truth and sale and housing inspections, in Minnesota, where the city's going to come look for some stuff, but most of the stuff they look for is actually what in the house could affect the municipal water or sewer processing, what things could be, affecting, other type of utility services. And then they mix in a few safety things to make people feel good about it. But the scope of work is so narrow that sometimes people would buy these houses and just base their decision off a TISH report. And then they would find out that there's $60,000 to $80,000 worth of stuff that they couldn't afford that was wrong with the house. That's a right now fix. But I hope you guys have a great day. Dirk, thanks for inviting me on. Ken, nice to meet you. Joe, nice to meet you. And safe travels. God bless.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. And that's something like what Jim was just saying about those safety inspections that the cities did. And I remember those were like in Minneapolis and St. Paul areas. And all they check is like, oh, is there a smoke detector? They won't even check to see if they work. Is there a carbon monoxide detector? Okay. And then they're gone. Like, oh, you got a GFCI? Okay, we're gone. And I think the same thing with appraisals. If it was a VA loan or something, they have to go in and look and see if there's a little bit of safety, but that's pretty much minimum standard.
Well, have you ever heard of a FHA inspector?
I have.
Do you know who that is? That's actually the appraiser is actually who does that. And I never did an appraisal and walk the roof. And I've had people come back to me and say, well, the FHA inspector said the roof was bad. And I'm thinking, how did he know that if he never got on it? It used to kill me. But it goes to say what Jim was saying, that the training wasn't very extensive. To get your FHA certification, as they called it, was a couple of hours and a little test. And it didn't get very deep. It just told you what they wanted, a procedure to follow. And if everything worked, then it's good. But I have heard that it's a lot different today. They've stepped it up since we had that real estate fallout back in 07, 06, 07. Of course, they blamed all of that on us appraisers, but I think more of the blame was on the bankers. But irrelevant from that, they have put more weight on the appraiser's shoulders on the inspections that they do, and they do get a better training and a better feeling for construction than what they used to. But it used to be a joke, because the main thing we were worried about was the numbers, the value numbers. And if it was a 3.2 or 4.2 or what it was, and that the kitchens were functionable and the bathrooms were functionable, and that was basically it. And the size of the house, square footage.
So there is those type of inspections here. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I was thinking too. And is there anybody out there? I don't know how many people we have on the webinar, but if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, type them into the comments here. We got a few minutes left, about 10 minutes, and then we're going to be signing it off. But I think like whenever we're doing these type of inspections, if it is gas or electric, whatever, as a home inspector, we just defer them out to you guys anyways. Yeah, in the long run. So it's almost like you want to be partnered up with the home inspector. And so we're like the jack of all trades. You're the master of one. Yeah. And that's kind of how England and the UK basically does it.
Very, very much so. Yeah. I mean, what I think personally for me, I think the ideology and the methodology of how home inspectors work, I think it's great. Why from an attorney's perspective recommend the gas engineer first? Why not? I mean, we don't necessarily have it the same structure.
Still general.
Why not recommend the home inspector first? Because you paid all these individual tradespeople to come in and inspect the houses, but yet you guys are qualified and trained enough to actually take the panel off the electric and say, do you know what? You don't need an electrical inspection. This looks like a good install. The wires are okay. There's no corrosion. The wiring size is correct. You've got GFCI, you've got AFCI. You've paid the home inspector X, but you've just saved Y in an electrical engineer coming out and verifying that. On the flip side, you've actually gone to the furnace and said, hey, this flue doesn't look like it's installed correctly. There's no carbon monoxide alarm. looks a little old. I'd actually recommend this guy.
Now they're paying more money.
Now, okay, they're paying a little bit more money, but you've saved them on the electrics. So I think you give a really good broad understanding of everything instead of actually paying all these individual people. And then I suppose one of the big things in inspecting is it's subjective. There are some things, even in gas, that's very black and white. You know, when we're looking for gas leaks, we know what the tolerances are, we know what we're looking for. But when we're looking at a boiler, even as a home inspector, you might say, that's okay. But then Ken might say, nope, that's not. You're looking at, the pipe work, and as much as there's regulation that state pipe work should be X size, one engineer will come and say, yeah, that pipe work's fine. And the other engineer will come and say, no, that's not fine. And it's finding that fine line between opinion. Yeah, between opinion, whereas the home inspector provides a broad opinion, and then the gas engineer can then narrow that down as to whether that opinion was correct or incorrect. Obviously, a gas leak, if you put your gas sniffer on a pipe and it bleeps, there's no subjectivity to that. It's leaking, it's leaking.
And with our standard, we don't even have to do that.
Yeah.
And but we're looking at the safety. Is there a backflow preventer in there? Yes. It's connected to the main water. We want to make sure there's backflow preventer. And I don't know if Ken knows all about boilers and stuff, but that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the expansion tank. If there was an expansion tank, if it's an on-demand one versus one that's, older and actually all wood fired. Matter of fact, I've actually dealt with a wood fired boiler in Minnesota. It was wood, gas, and it had a combustion, air combustion on top of it. So it had 3 different methods. It was cool. It was out in the middle of the woods, and it was like, okay, so if this didn't work, then he could either use propane, or he could use electric, or he could heat it with wood, which was it was just crazy. It was a cool system, but so very complicated.
Yeah, I can imagine. But no, I
Sorry.
I think what you guys do, like, I think it's really the odd aspects of it to then say, this is good, this isn't good. We recommend this. I think it's so crucial to someone buying a house, but or owning a house, whether you've never had an inspection and you think, do you know what, we need one, because it's surprising the little things that you
Could have been prevented.
Yeah,
There was a leak under the sink. Now I have to get rid of my whole entire cupboards because of this, which we would have been able to find because we did our inspection. But then you come in and it's just gas. I'm not looking underneath the sink. I'm not looking at the garbage disposal if you had one. And I gave Joe here a microwave tester. He had no idea what that was. It was pretty cool. I covered up the microwave side and showed him how it works, and so now he can go around and check microwaves.
But yeah, I mean, so obviously for InterNACHI, what's your guys' CPD and like continuous training like? So like from our guys for gas, we have what's called an ACS. So we reset our exams every 5 years.
Nope.
So every 5 years we've got to go back and then we retest, I say the basics, but the basics of what we're qualified in. And then further to that, when we qualify, we first qualify to work on one set of appliances. So that could be boilers, that could be cookers, that could be fires. We don't qualify initially on every area. It's segregated, and then 6 months we can then add another one to our ticket. And sorry, after 6 months, you go and do the retraining. But Ken, I think we have an echo on your end.
I don't know what that was. Now you're.
Oh, it's okay. It's gone now.
Yeah, but I think you're muted, so you're good. Well, something else like so I lost my train of thought here.
Yeah. So what's like? So like for us, like we do all our like tickets, and then we retrain every 5 years.
That's
signed off. What's your CPD like in regards to that?
So being an InterNACHI member, every 2 years we're supposed to retake that test. We're always supposed to get more continuing education. I think I got thousands of hours of continuing education, and I love to take education. And sometimes I'll be up till 1:00 in the morning taking courses because it's there.
Yeah.
Why not? If you're not learning, you're dying, and that's the way I look at it. And if you're not helping others, you're part of a problem, not a solution.
Yeah.
and that's how I look at life. So I don't know.
The older you get, it's called remembering.
Yeah, that guy. What's his name? Said that too. I remember people.
Remembering names.
Exactly. But I don't know. Do you have any other final thoughts there, Ken?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I think it's pretty awesome. I really appreciate Joe coming on. I don't see any questions in the chat box here, so I mean, I think this was just kind of a fun roundtable, I guess you
Yeah.
call it. And, AJ, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add in there.
Dirk, Joe, Ken, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Guys. Have a good one.
Y'all have a good day.